Venice is a very old city, and as such it was a party to the plague and the Black Death more than once, much like a lot of the rest of Europe as well. But here in Venice they had a lot of islands which they used for quarantine to put people on who had the sickness. Italy is where we get the word quarantine from, because quaranta means 40 and the quarantine period was 40 days long. There were two particular islands that were used a lot. One of them was Lazaretto Vecchio, which is the old quarantine island, which is where a plague hospital was, and the other island was Lazaretto Nuovo, which was the new quarantine island, which was largely used to check sailors and check them for sickness when they came in. But both of those islands became places where mass graves were, just hundreds of bodies being tossed in, one on top of the other. It was on Lazaretto Nuovo that the vampire of Venice was found. Basically, upon the excavation of one of these mass graves, the body of a woman in her 60s or 70s was found with a brick shoved into her mouth. This was a common prevention for vampirism. Now, this woman was thought to be a shroud eater, which is a kind of vampire that finds its origins in Germanic lore. Basically, people would open mass graves as you would in the plague, because you need to put more bodies in there. And when they opened the grave, they would find bodies that looked like they had been eating their burial shrouds. Now, there might be a scientific reason for this. Scientists tell us that there's a kind of bacteria in our mouth that after we die could be dissolving those burial shrouds and make it look like they'd been eaten after death. Oftentimes these shroud eaters also had a kind of red tinge to their cheek, just as a part of decomposition, but it kind of looked like they were alive. Now, shroud eaters are not like the traditional vampire you see in Hollywood and stuff like that. They couldn't be turned into a vampire by a bite or a scratch or things like that from another vampire. They generally became one after an unnatural death. Now, that could be suicide, or that could be an accidental early death, something like that. They were also known to kind of be an omen of sickness and stuff around death as well. So you had the idea that if a group of people suddenly contracted the Black Death, suddenly caught the plague and died, the first one of them to die had been a shroud eater. And after they died, it was believed that they consumed their burial shroud, and then they consumed their own body before they went on to eating and devouring other people. Also, it was said that they kind of sucked the life force from their family and their close loved ones would get sick after their death or their transformation into the shroud eater vampire. Now, apparently you immobilize or kill a shroud eater by basically putting a coin in its mouth and then chopping off its head. That should get rid of it. But another way that you can paralyze these creatures is by obviously shoving a brick or a rock or a spike inside their mouth. That stops them being able to eat. Problem solved.